In the last video, we took a look at adding a transition to an input field, your text field for your form. In this video, we're going to do a transition on an image. So it's going to look something like this. Okay, so when I hover over this, it's going to zoom in. Okay, so that's kind of cool, right? So let's take a look at how to do that in your CSS. So the first thing I'm going to do is to create a new page. So I'm going to call it zoom.html. Okay, so in zoom.html, make sure you do save it as .html extension. And in the body here, okay, we're going to have, I'm going to just keep it really simple, just have a div, okay, or you can have a section or, you know, main or whatever you like to call it. Here, I'm going to just use a plain div. Okay, so div, the class is going to be zoom. All right, so div begins here and ends here, and inside the div I have figure, okay, and inside the figure I have an image. Okay, so for the image I have a chai.jpg image, so it's a picture of a chai tea, of a cup of chai tea. Okay, and there we have it. Okay, very simple. So it'll end up looking like this, okay, without the transition yet. So you just have a div here, and the div has a class called zoom, and inside of it you have the figure, and inside the figure you have the image, and it's chai.jpg, and of course you would have it saved in your images here, chai.jpg there. All right, so I'm just going to close that. All right, so next thing is we're going to go over to the style.css, and we're going to apply some styles in here so that we can animate it or add the transition. So I'm going to add the section called image zoom here so that when I need to go through my CSS style sheet, I know exactly where to go to look at this transition effect. Okay, so zoom.zoom, because it's a class, I'm going to add a border of 1 pixel, solid black, padding, and margin, and I'm going to make the width 400 pixels. Okay, so this is all things that we're familiar with. I'm just adding a border, adding padding, and then I'm adding a margin, and then a width. Okay, very simple. Next, I'm going to go to zoom. So inside of zoom, only the figure image inside of zoom is going to be width 100%. So 100% of whatever it's in, and it's inside of the zoom, right? Okay, inside of that. All right, so let's move on. And then the figure, this is important, has to have a margin of 0, a padding of 0, and the background color of white. And make sure you do overflow hidden. Okay, so you can pause the video right now so you can copy this code. All right, and then when you're done, you can continue on. So make sure that you have all this word for word in your CSS. All right, so let's move on. So you're familiar with all that, right? Margin, padding, overflow, background, all those styles you're familiar with. Now let's go learn some new ones, and these are the important ones. So this is just setting it up so that when you zoom into the image, it looks proper, okay? So if you got any of these wrong, you'll see that when you zoom in, it will look kind of strange. All right, so now that we're all set up, let's go look at the transform CSS rule. Now we have WebKit transform, and this is just because it's for a different browser engine. So this is the same declaration. It might still work if you don't put the WebKit transition in it, but it's just to make sure that it also works for a different browser engine in case you're viewing it on a different browser, okay? So different browsers, sometimes you need different CSS rules for so that it works. So just to cover a bigger base, a wider base, you just want to add, you know, all the different declarations so that it works for as many different browsers as possible. Anyway, so the very similar WebKit transform is the same as transform. Okay, so we're going to start with the scale of 1, which is the scale, normal scale. Okay, and then when you transition away from this, in 0.3 seconds, you're going to ease in out. Okay, so if you don't ease in out, it's just going to go right to the transition instead of having that nice easing effect. Okay, so when I hover over this zoom, so zoom hover, the figure image is then going to transform to, the scale is now going to be 1.3. So from 1 is going to transform to 1.3, and that's why you have this effect. So this is 1 and it transforms to 1.3 and it eases in and out. Okay, so you can change how fast that eases in and out by changing the amount of time that it takes to ease in and out. And there you go, you have your nice effect here. Okay, so the next one I have is for making it black and white, and I wrote black and white. Okay, so the black and white, so this one I'm going to show you what it looks like. Okay, so the same thing, I'm going to have my div, and class is going to be black and white. I close my div here, then I have my figure element here, and inside of my figure element, I have the image tag here. Okay, and same image, I'm using the same image as a different page. This one is going to be black and white. When I hover over it, it's going to fade into a black and white color. So that's kind of cool, right? So let's go see what that looks like. It would be my CSS here. Okay, so black and white, and because I've already kind of determined my figure here. Okay, oops, there we go. So because this has already been added, I don't need to like declare it again in here, but it is important, the fact that the margin padding, background, and overflow, that's still important. Okay, anyway, so in my black and white here, I'm going to say the width is going to be 400 pixels. Okay, and it's going to be 100 pixels. The figure, the image inside of it is going to be 100 pixels of the container. All right, and then now we have a different one, which is not a transition, but rather filter. So filter grayscale. Okay, when you start out, okay, let me just show you what it looks like so you know what you're working towards. So I'm going to go here, packages, view in browser. So when you start out, it's going to be black and white because grayscale, I've already applied the image. When you show it, black and white, okay, the figure image, grayscale is 100% grayscale, okay, in the filter. And then the transition, when you're going to ease using 0.3 seconds to ease in out, ease into a grayscale of none. So there's no grayscale effect applied when you hover over it. Okay, so black and white, figure, hover, image, grayscale is going to be 0. Okay, so let's go take a look at what that looks like. So I hover over it, there's no grayscale. When I'm not hovering over it, it's grayscale is applied. Of course, you can have the opposite, right? Where you switch the value so that when you're not hovering over it, there's no grayscale, it's full color, and then when you hover over it, it becomes black and white. All right, so I'm just going to show you the code here. This is for grayscale. You can pause the video here at this point and then play around with that. Of course, you can also search online. There's lots of resources out there. It would be impossible to teach every single one of the cool transition animation effects out there for CSS. When you have learned enough and know basically how these things work, you can always go out there and find some of the cool CSS tricks that you can grab and apply, as long as you know which classes to apply to, which elements to apply to. The world's your oyster. You can go out there and explore.